r/Nosleep. Posted by u/dark and creepy. My grandfather was a POW in World War II. He told me about the tongueless prisoner. This story was told to me by my grandfather when he was still alive and I was only 12 at the time. It has resonated with me for so long because he was generally happy and a cheerful man, with him always cracking jokes, but the only time he wasn't like this was when this story was brought up. It came from when he fought during World War II as a bombardier in the U.S. Air Force. On one particular bombing mission, his aircraft was shot down past enemy lines and he was lucky to survive with 3 other of his fellow crewmates. Before they could gather themselves, they were surrounded by Nazi soldiers and taken prisoners of war. They were interrogated and treated terribly, but he did say how he was glad he wasn't captured by the Japanese because they treated prisoners of war even worse. This in itself could be considered scarring, and it did scar him, but not as much as when he came into contact with who they called the tongueless prisoner. I will retell it in first person because that was how I heard it and I want it to be as accurate as it can be. The first few weeks at the camp were dreadful and the rations were what you would expect to get from a nation you're at war with. I had to adjust to life as a prisoner and hope to be rescued or for the war to end. I thought I was going to make it out of there alive even if I was on the verge of starving, but still, I would be alive. That, however, soon changed when a new group of prisoners were brought to the camp. To what I remember, there were about 9 of them. They were mostly paratroopers from an operation that went wrong, as somehow the information surrounding it got leaked to the Japanese, who then informed the Germans. It was an ambush as soon as the paratroopers touched ground, from what they told me later. There was one soldier, however, who no one knew what brigade he was from. He looked like he scrambled through the woods for days or maybe even a month before coming here. His clothes were torn and barely held onto his bony body, which definitely was suffering from muscle atrophy. While the soldiers were marched in, this particular soldier lingered toward the back. His body quivered like he had just gotten out of a frigid lake. The guards stopped them in front of the current POWs, including me, and faced the new ones towards us. The German camp commandant stood to the side while a guard examined the military rank of each new prisoner before deciding on which bunking room they would be assigned. The officers generally got better beds, but they were still roughly worn, but the main reason I wished I was one was because they weren't required to work like the rest of us were. However, there wasn't too much work at this particular camp compared to others I've heard about since. We mainly were taken in small controlled groups to go clean up rubble of nearby towns that had been bombed or digging new latrines, among other things. Anyway, when the German guard finished announcing where the paratroopers would bunk, he walked in front of the skinny, shivering soldier. He looked towards the camp commandant with a confused look and said something in German. The camp commandant walked forward and was talking with him before he asked the thin soldier in an accent, "What rank and company are you?" The quivering man stood silent. "It is a simple question. Why do you not answer?" the camp commandant asked. The soldier opened his mouth wide and the commandant gasped. Turning to the side, he asked a guard to do something in German and he grabbed a paper and pencil and gave it to the soldier. It was at this moment that myself and the rest of the camp realized that this man didn't have tongue. Some people could see it, but I had people who stood ahead of me blocking the view. I wondered if he had been tortured that ended with it being cut out, but there truly was no way of knowing without asking. The tongueless soldier handed the camp commandant the paper. He gazed at it saying, "So you're just an infantryman? There is a bed in bunkhouse 4. Upon hearing this, my heart raced because that was the same bunkhouse I was in. At this point I was interested in finding out about his backstory, even if it would have to be done by paper. Thinking about what it could possibly be, the camp commandant dismissed us and we were to help the new soldiers get acquainted. The tongueless soldier was then bombarded with questions and people trying to give him pieces of paper to write on. Most of it was toilet paper because paper was scarce. He didn't even acknowledge them while he looked for the bunkhouse he was given. I ran up beside him and said, "Okay, everyone lay off him. He needs his space right now, cause just look at him. It looks like he hasn't eaten in days. I'll show him around and try to find him some extra scraps left over." I smiled and then whispered to the surrounding prisoners, "I'll figure out what happened to him and tell you boys later." They agreed and soon wandered off after giving me the pieces of paper I could use to talk to him. "So we're bunkhouse mates?" I said, trying to get his attention while he walked. He, however, didn't even look at me. "You know you're heading the wrong way. Bunkhouse 4 is over there." This time his eyes looked at me and he was about the same height as me with dirty dark brown hair that covered his face. He couldn't say anything, but by his looks he seemed to appreciate my help. He then walked off towards it without me. I felt awkward, but I really wanted to know what happened to him, so I ran up again beside him and asked, "Hey, I can tell you want to be left alone, but that ain't gonna happen unless we find out what happened to you. Did you get tortured or?" His body started to tremble even more as he stopped in place. Shaking, he snatched one of the papers and pencils from my hands and started writing. Handing it back, it read, "I cut it out." I read the 4 letters and was stumped. Was this true? Did he actually cut out his own tongue? Why? I asked. He started writing again and handed another note over. "It's watching me. I can't escape it and I had to do it to stay alive." Upon reading this, I immediately thought that this man was crazy or had some bad PTSD from the war. "Don't worry, you're safe in here from whatever's out there," I replied, trying to comfort him. He early shook his head while writing another one that read, "It followed me and no one's safe here." "Who is following you? Do you know something you shouldn't and so someone's trying to assassinate you?" I asked, but he took the papers from my hands and while stuffing them into his pocket he headed inside the bunkhouse. Standing there alone, I felt an eerie feeling run down my back and felt a sensation of being watched and a paranoia to a degree that I had never felt before or since. I wondered if there was a sniper watching the camp, but my gut felt like it was something much worse. One of my close friends I had made while at the camp named John walked up with a group of people who asked, "So what's wrong with him?" I looked at them strangely and replied, "I think someone's out to kill him or he's insane and I'm not messing around here." He told me that he cut his tongue out because it was the only way to save himself from something that supposedly followed him here. How that makes any sense at all beats me. I suppose he thinks the people would stop following him, but again, it's crazy talk. Huh? That guy must have been through a lot out there. "Did you catch his name?" John asked. "Nah, I forgot to ask because I was so taken back by what he said." Well, I'm gonna go ask him and be right back," John said while walking into bunkhouse 4. The rest of the other P.O.Ws asked more questions about him, but I told them all I knew and had nothing left to say. While I was chatting with them, we heard John say in the background, "Why won't you tell me your name?" "What? Are you embarrassed by it?" We heard silence for a moment before John continued, "You need some serious help. You ain't gonna make it in here without some friends." John then came walking out towards us. "So what happened in there?" I asked. "Well, you might have heard, but I asked him what his name was and he just straight up ignored me. Like I didn't even exist. I get he was trying to get some shut-eye but he wasn't asleep yet," John replied. There has to be something off with him, but it might just be that he's in shock right now, so I think it would be best for all of us to just give him some space," I said to the group. They agreed and went their separate ways and everything was normal until we were ordered into our bunkhouses for the night. The guards locked the wood door on the bunkhouse we were in. Roughly 5 minutes later, the tongueless prisoner began to hyperventilate, sounding like he was having a heart attack. Someone in the darkness said, "Shut up, whoever that is. I'm trying to sleep." The breathing, however, only grew louder. I tried to ignore it and was on the verge of slumber until he started groaning. Everyone got up to see what was going on with him, and in the darkness we heard him hit the wooden floor with a hard thump. Then intense scratching echoed throughout the bunk. "Should I light a candle?" one man asked. "Yeah, but be discreet about it cause we don't want any of the guard posts thinking we're up to something. Keep it away from the windows the best you can," I replied as we gathered around where the tongueless soldier laid hunched over, scratching into the wood. "What is he doing?" I asked myself while moving closer. He was trying to say something with his mouth, but it came out as a fast mumbled mess. That's when the one with the candle brought it close to where the man was hunched over. "He's trying to write something?" the man with the candle said. "What? What is it?" the group of prisoners whispered. I walked closer and in the wood floorboards he was scratching something. The longer he scratched into it, the more streaks of blood smeared across the top of it. I made out the first words and read them out loud. "It's here." I paused and thought before saying, "I think he's just talking about the thing that's supposedly following him that I told you guys about earlier. He must have had a nightmare or something, cause there's no way anyone can get into this bunkhouse, especially how surveyed this camp is. I'm heading back to bed." Everyone looked at me while I began to walk towards my bunk before the man grabbed my shirt with his bloody hands. He then pointed to the floor of where he wrote, which said, "It's here. Don't look outside." Then one of the British POWs who was bunked with us named George said, "Look mate, we understand you've been through some bloody crap, but this thing that's following you is in your head. It's not real and none of us are gonna get a wink of sleep if you..." A man in the back interrupted him, saying while looking out the window, "Whoa, what in the bloody hell is that thing?" Upon hearing this, the tongueless man's eyes grew wide and he was nearly about to tear my shirt off. The man staring out the window continued saying, "It looks like..." But before he was able to finish his sentence, the tongueless soldier leapt on him and tackled him to the ground with speed that seemed humanly impossible. He held the one soldier's mouth closed so he couldn't speak, and the surrounding soldiers pried him off against his will. He kicked, punched, and bit like his life depended on it. "What's wrong?" we all asked. And he stopped fighting and outstretched his hand. I grabbed the papers that he had set next to his bunk and a pencil which I swiftly handed over to him. He wrote fiercely and I read it out loud, "Don't describe what it looks like." The man who had been tackled to the ground began to sit up and asked with wide eyes, "What is that thing?" The tongueless soldier then wrote in response, "I don't know, but I lost my fellow platoon to that thing while we crash-landed into the wilderness. While trying to get back to a nearby army post, someone saw it and went on to call us over and describe what it looked like. I was a little slow getting over there, but as soon as I did, the thing was already digging into everyone. That's when I thought I was dead, as it looked straight at me for a few seconds before running off into the woods. I tried to make it back to the army base by myself, but that thing kept following me until I was eventually captured and sent here." After reading it out loud to everyone, I asked, "Why didn't it kill you?" Writing again, he handed another note over that read, "I realized why it killed them. They described what it looked like. Thinking I could get rid of it and stop it from following me, I cut out my own tongue to prove that I would never describe it. That was all for nothing." "Well, what does it look like then?" another soldier asked. "Are you stupid? He just said that he'd die if he said," I replied. "Do you really think this is true? He has to be messing with us. I want to see if he's actually telling the truth, so he should tell us what it looks like. If nothing happens, then it means his whole story is fake," the soldier said while stepping closer. "But what if it is real and we all die?" I asked. "If that happens, then I guess aliens and Bigfoot and all that other stuff is real too," he replied with a cackle before continuing, "So go on ahead, tell us." The tongueless man shook his head angrily, and that's when the soldier turned to the man that had supposedly seen the thing outside. "How about you? You probably didn't even see anything other than a guard patrolling. Go ahead. Tell us what it looks like." The man on the ground quivered in the same manner the tongueless man did. He turned to the tongueless soldier and mumbled, "So if I describe it, it'll kill me?" The tongueless soldier nodded and the man on the ground said, "Get me a knife?" Everyone in the bunkhouse was confused before someone said, "We don't have any knives here." All weapons were confiscated long before any one of us got here. Without any hesitation, the man on the ground took his hand and started digging at his tongue. His unclipped fingernails dug deep into it and his hands were now dripping blood onto the wood boards below. The speed at which he was going was so intense that no one could get over the shock fast enough to stop him, but just watch the horror ensue. That's when I finally had enough and couldn't watch this for another second, and so I grabbed both of his arms, which he flailed around the room trying to get back into his mouth. John and a British soldier helped me gain control of him so he couldn't harm himself anymore. "Let go!" he screamed at us. "I'm going to die." I quickly asked someone what his name was fast because I didn't know him too well, and they replied that it was Robert. "Calm down, Ruber. It's going to be fine, but if you don't shut it, then those guards on patrol are gonna come in here and punish all of us. You got that?" I whispered while pinning him tightly against the ground with help from John. He looked me straight in the eyes and shook his head. "I'm a dead man if I don't do this. That thing. It's terrible. Worse than hell." After saying this, he stuck his tongue out at us before biting down with all of his might. The sight made me nauseous as he moved his bottom jaw in a sawing motion before the tongue was only hanging on by a few strands of flesh. I let go of him as well as John because there was nothing we could do to stop him. With his now released hands, Robert tore it off completely and everyone gasped in utter disgust, trying to hold back their stomachs. The one man who previously was saying that this was all made up, named Randy, now stood motionless before saying, "This has got to be some elaborate prank, because no way he just bit off his own tongue. So come on guys, the fun's over. Just admit it." Robert stared at him with his mouth dripping blood while on the verge of screaming in agonizing pain. He tried to mutter some words before remembering he couldn't speak. That's when he spit blood on Randy before grabbing and slamming his head against the wall. Then he dragged him to the window and pressed his head against it while mumbling words that came out as, "Oh God. Oh God." I could tell he was saying, "Look at it." Robert let him go. We cried out while trying to pry him off, but he seemed to be on drugs as every last muscle was being used at full capacity. Randy screamed, "Oh, ICIT please. Let me go. I believe you now. ITES coming closer. Oh hell please no. IT looks like." Randy was yanked through the bulletproof glass window ferociously. Robert was holding on to him so tightly he was pulled through also. I and everyone else looked away as to not catch a single glimpse as to what this thing looked like. In less than 20 seconds, guards had quickly entered the bunkhouse and the spotlight from a guard tower was focused on it with the bright light shining through the broken window. The guard ordered us to our assigned bunks, which we quickly went to. All of us were speechless on what had happened. The guards noticed the missing POWs and shattered the window, so they quickly sent out a patrol but found nothing, and to this day the bodies of Robert and Randy were never recovered. The guards supposed that they had escaped but were perplexed on how we were able to break through the bulletproof glass and questioned everyone in the bunkhouse intensely. This, however, was the start to much more to come. We tried to tell them the truth, but they thought it was all lies, which I can't blame them for. I would have thought the same thing if I were in their shoes. The rest of the camp later asked what had happened, and we told them, and again they didn't believe us until the nights that followed. More people went missing and everyone started becoming extremely paranoid. The POW camp guards thought that people were escaping, while the prisoners who didn't know the backstory thought that the guards were secretly executing prisoners. It was the worst time of my life, as every night I was there I could hear the tongueless soldiers start to mumble in the night, and that's when I just stuck my head deeper under my blanket and pillow while closing my eyes so tight I felt that I was going to burst a blood vessel. Luckily, we only were there for 2 more weeks before being liberated by allies. Once I finally got out of that place I felt a sense of safety and freedom. However, I still sometimes feel at night that the thing's just outside my window, waiting for me to look outside.